Okay. Wow. What the heck just came in Brown? Which was that that was huge for her.
Yeah, so that was about 18,000 votes, and she nets 2,000.
Question. Was that that wasn't central count, was it?
It's possible. There's no remaining vote in Brown according to our counter. I'll check the check the website.
I said I want percent more, but now I do, because if that was central count, what was his percentage of that vote?
Let's take a look.
If this was central count, this is the question we're getting at from Milwaukee. If he just got buried in central count Green Bay,
it was 44 to 34. Hong over Crowley.
Okay. Okay, yeah, can we ask our decision desk what we think that was that just,
Yep.
And do we think there's central count left for?
What's up, family? Let me tell you something about what just happened out here, because the mainstream media is sitting there looking crazy right now and they don't even know it. You had a race everybody was watching, and every single poll had this candidate winning by 20 points. 20 points. That's not a toss up. That's not a close race. That's supposed to be a blowout. That's the kind of number that makes you say, all right, the writing is on the wall. The game is over. She's going to walk in there and take the win easy. Except that's not what happened. What actually happened is she lost, plain and simple. The polls were wrong. The narrative was wrong. And now the people who spent weeks telling you this race was over are sitting there on live television trying to explain away something they never saw coming. And family, that right there is the part you need to pay attention to, because it tells you everything you need to know about how the media operates in this country. They don't report news. They manufacture narratives, basically. They pick a storyline and then they find the data that fits it, or they manufacture the data itself. And when the data doesn't fit, they gaslight you into thinking you are the one who can't read the room. So let's break this down in plain English so you understand exactly what happened here and why it matters for every single election going forward. So here's what we got. You got a candidate running in a district or a state where the media has been telling you for months that she's unbeatable. That's Francesca Hong, right? Every major poster, every news outlet, every cable news chyron, they're all saying the same thing. She's up by double digits. She's got momentum. The opposition can't catch up. The race is over before it started. And then election night comes and the numbers start rolling in. And guess what? She's not winning. She's not even close. She's losing. And you watch the commentators on these networks and you see their faces change in real time. You see the confusion. You see the panic. You see them scrambling and scraping to explain what they never prepared to explain, because they genuinely believe their own propaganda. And this is where it gets interesting, family, because watch what happens next. They don't say we were wrong. They don't say the polls missed it. They don't say the narrative was off. What they do is they pivot to excuses immediately. They start talking about turnout models. They start talking about sample sizes. They start talking about undecided voters breaking late. They throw out every technical excuse they can find except the one obvious truth, which is that they were pushing a narrative that had nothing to do with reality. And the reason they were pushing that narrative, family, is because they wanted her to win. They needed her to win and had invested so much emotional and political capital into this candidate that they couldn't conceive of a world where the voters said no. So they convinced themselves and tried to convince you that it was in the bag. And when it didn't happen, the mask slipped, right? The mask slipped. You saw it live. You saw the frustration. You saw the bitterness. You saw people who are supposed to be objective journalists reacting like fans whose teams just lost. And that right there is the receipt. That's the moment where they tell on themselves without even realizing, right? And let me say something about polling in general, because I think people misunderstand what polls are and what they're designed to do. A poll is not a measurement of reality. It's a measurement of who answered the phone and what they said in that moment. And the people who answer phones for polls are not a random cross section of America. They are a specific type of person. They are people who have landlines. They are people who have time to talk. There are people who trust institutions enough to participate in the institutional process. That already skews the data, right? It skews the data. On top of that, most posters use something called weighing. which is a fancy word for adjusting the numbers to fit what you think the electorate is going to look like, right? What you think the electorate is going to look like. And that's where the manipulation happens. If you assume the electorate is going to be younger or more diverse or more democratic than it actually ends up being, you can manufacture a lead that doesn't exist. And now they're trying to excuse and make sense of this poll of Francesca Hong losing. And they're basically trying to use the young voter theory as an excuse for this data that they basically manufactured and got way over their heels.
Okay. What are some of the possible reasons why these polls are ultimately overstating the support that they get on Election Day?
Yeah, if this were just about, the fact that the polls overestimate the two lefties, that would be one thing. But I think that this may speak to something bigger, which is the polling may be having too many of those young progressives. And what am I talking about? Well, just take a look here. Who won the 5 counties with the most under the age of 40? That is 18 to 39. In the Michigan Senate, it was Abdul Assayed. He won 05. How about in Wisconsin, Governor? The exact same thing. In the youngest counties, that is where these lefties did the best. And so when you kind of look at the polling, you go, hey, wait a minute, maybe these polls had too many younger folks in them. And I think that speaks to something larger potentially, which is all these pollings, which is showing progressivism on the left, the far left rising, seeing democratic socialism, especially in the case of Wisconsin, rising. You got to look at these results and say, hey, wait a minute, maybe, Johnny, maybe these polls are overestimating how much that democratic socialism is rising within the Democratic Party. Because in 2 key statewide races in a row, what we've seen is the lefties being vastly overestimated, and in the case of Wisconsin, the Democratic Socialists being vastly overestimated by 20 points.
If you oversample among young people, one of the things that can happen is young people don't vote as much.
Yes.
And then you can skew the ultimate results there.
Correct. And I think that means so much as we're looking at these polls and what the actual...
So there you have it, right? There you have it. If you assume the electorate is going to be younger or more diverse or more democratic than it actually ends up being, you can manufacture a lead that don't exist, is my point. You can show a candidate up by 20 points when in reality the race is dead even. And this is why CNN, they're trying to make some type of sense of these polls and that data that slipped in regards of human error.
Yeah. Here's the thing. Here's let's look at it this way. We're kind of indefinitely waiting for them to get their act together here.
Right? Human error. So, and that's basically him trying to make sense of not only the polling, because you seen he was like, whoa, what happened here in the first clip I showed you? This is them trying to make sense of a human error, because apparently on election night, 5 out of the 9 USB sticks with absentee ballot results contain only audit logs rather than the actual vote totals. All right. So I want to show you in regards to that, because this is what has came out.
And the results. What we uncovered was that 5 of the sticks had the audit log downloaded and not the results. It's a human error. These things can happen. So basically what we need to do is go back to the operations center, and we're going to download out of those 5 machines the results and make sure that's not the audit log. So we have the reports printed from the first download. We're going to reprint and start the process so that we can compare those results. We invite you to come join us. Milwaukee Police Department will come with us too. And so we'll re-download those results and then send them back here to be uploaded.
5 machines are at issue?
Correct. Not the machines, the sticks. So the download process was the audit log was downloaded, not the results.
Out of how many sticks?
9.
And so you will only be reviewing those 5 sticks?
Correct.
But we can't know all of the results, and we can't see these 4 sticks worth of results that were done correctly.
Can you?
There you have it, right? And then on live television, you see him scrambling and scraping. He's basically trying to artfully explain by saying they need to get their act together, right?
I guess the exact thing, yes, is if 5 of the USB sticks were missing results from the election, so then they have to go try to re-grab them. Yeah, and they're all the folks behind the scenes are talking about this as well, so we can also look. It's unfortunate.
The folks behind the scenes here, you're saying?
Yes.
Are how do I ask this artfully?
I guess
For them to get their act together here and get the sticks and bring them back and go on. And we've got folks here who are working real late. And I don't think we want to, keep them here to, this could go 90 minutes. And it's 90 minutes of me saying,
Yeah.
have you heard of any other athletes running for Congress? It's like I know we've come so far here. It's been 4 hours since polls closed. It's been an unbelievably interesting and an intense night here, and it really is coming down to this one giant, update in Milwaukee. But man, we waited 90 minutes for them. They did this whole procession, and then they find out there's nothing on the sticks. And yeah, so it's just my way of saying I'm just trying to say to the audience here, so I'm not abruptly ending on them, just why we're doing this, because the audience has been with us for 4-6 hours in some cases for this moment that didn't happen, and so folks, I think we are gonna wrap it here for the reasons we're saying here. Just, but I want you to know I hate doing this to you, because you've been. I know you're here for results, and we've come to the point where it's like one thing away. I hope you understand that we just, we got to let everyone here has got to, has been here for a long time, and so I'm just trying to. Okay. Oh, I need. So this is okay. So folks, here's what's happening. I'm doing this is sort of a cut-in thing. I have to. They're gonna. Let me set this so it's.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Producing the producer, Melissa. Do we want to do Wisconsin results in these updates, or how do we want to parse these out? Okay.
Okay, so we're doing this is like kind of a cut-in thing. We're gonna tape here that they're gonna insert into News Now. So if you'd like, you can watch us put this together.
My man is flabbergasted, and to me, it sounds like the Democrats got a taste of their own medicine of basically compromising our elections and not upholding election integrity. And it seems like they're eating themselves alive because they wanted Francesca Hong to win instead of David Crowley, right? So my whole point is, you can show a candidate up by 20 points when in reality the race is dead even. And when election day comes and the actual voters show up and they don't look like the voters you assume would show up, your whole poll falls apart. But by then the damage is done, because you already spent weeks telling people this race is decided, and you already shaped the conversation. You already influenced donations and volunteer energy and voter enthusiasm on one side while depressing it onto the other. And the poll becomes a political weapon disguised as objective data. And that's exactly what happened here. So let's talk about what this candidate represented, right? She was the media's darling She was the one they propped up. Every interview was friendly, every segment was positive, every story framed her as the future of the party, while her opponent was painted as extreme or out of touch or dangerous. And you can see it in the coverage. You could see the difference in tone, and you can see the difference in how many questions were asked versus how many softballs were thrown. And then when the voters had their say, they rejected her, not by a little, by enough that the polls weren't just slightly off. They were laughably wrong. And now you got pundits sitting there on live television trying to process what happened, and you can see the wheels turning in their heads because they can't blame the voters because that would be admitting the voters made a choice they didn't like, and they can't blame the candidate because that would be admitting their chosen candidate wasn't as strong as they thought. So they blame the process, they blame the turnout, they blame messaging, they blame everything except the one thing that's actually true, which is that they were living in a bubble, and the bubble popped on live television. And family, if you've been watching politics for more than 5 minutes, you've seen this movie before. You've seen it with Hillary Clinton in 2016. You've seen it with every election where the establishment picks a candidate and the actual voters pick someone else. It's the same pattern every single time. And the media falls in love. The polls show a blowout. The voters show up and say something different. And then the media spends the next week explaining why the voters were wrong instead of just admitting they were wrong. That's not journalism. That's damage control. And let's talk about what this candidate represented, right? Not only have you seen what she was basically saying in regards of she wanted to get rid of Thanksgiving, she wanted to get rid of Christmas, and she didn't like 4th of July, and she basically wanted to abolish and stand for the things that the Democratic Socialists of America represent, the DSA, right? The movement, the coalition that's basically eating and overtaking the Democratic Party because they have went so far left. And instead of Chuck Schumer, who is a big rhino in the Democratic Party saying we just have a big tent, instead of realizing and saying the simple fact is like, look, we're being overcome because we went so far left in the form of just wanting to be in control and power. And now we're eating ourselves alive and throwing each other under the bus in the name of extremism because we basically are having individuals who want to push us rhinos out of the Democratic Party as they are young comers and young people who basically want to blame success in capitalism by being able to build yourself up and make something out of nothing. Blame those who actually done something with themselves because we are basically individuals with bachelor's degrees who had a basket weaving degree, and we need to blame someone for our loans that we took out. And the job market is not basically going in our favor because we have degrees that don't actually translate into real skills into the marketplace to be viable in America. So we just want to get rid of and eradicate the whole thing. And we actually got the liking and rubbed hands and was buddy with the rhinos Democrats like Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, and they put us in office in the name of socialism, which really is disguised as communism because we want everything in the form of government control and government ran, and we want to control it so we can hand out and do what we want to do and eradicate and basically abolish everything in the fabric of what America truly represents. And that means even the holidays that's part of American culture. With the simple fact that they say Thanksgiving is just a colonizer holiday and demonizing white people on top of it. Because Francesca Hong, and this is her words, not mine, she said she went to a restaurant that was full of old white people and they were basically colonizers. She felt uncomfortable because of white people. And this is how far we come. And this is where the bigger conversation comes in, family, because this isn't just about one race. This is about a systemic failure in American media. The people who are supposed to inform you have become a political operation, and they have become an extension of one party's messaging machine. And they don't even try to hide it anymore. They frame every story from one perspective, and they choose which facts to highlight and which facts to bury. And they decide which candidates are viable and which candidates are fringe. And when reality doesn't match their narrative, they don't adjust the narrative. They just try to adjust reality. And they try to convince you that what you saw with your own eyes didn't happen. They tried to convince you that the election was stolen or that the voters were misled or the outcome doesn't reflect the true will of the people. But you know what the true will of the people is, family? The true will of the people is the votes that were cast. The true will of the people is the results that were certified. The true will of the people is the candidate who actually won. Not the candidate the media wanted to win, and not the candidate the polls said would win. Not the candidate the focus groups and the consultants and the insiders picked. The candidate who won, period. So when you look at all of that and you see with Liz Smith and MS Now trying to basically make sense of it while openly discussing the Democratic leaders and selective nominees. This is their take on that at MS Now. formerly known as MSNBC.
It is really, and I want to bring Liz Smith into this conversation because Liz and I grew up in Democratic politics. We're still young, of course, but we grew up in Democratic politics together, and I think we both remember well when party leadership really selected the nominees. Now, you would never say it that way exactly, but they would.
But you can now.
Now we can. We're free. You know, they really did because they would put money behind it. They would endorse. And now it looks very much like party leaders are not picking the nominees. In fact, party leaders pushing nominees is a negative. It's a negative in many of these races, but it is.
So there you have it, right? So let me tell you what the takeaway is here, because I don't want you to just watch this and get angry. I want you to learn something. Here's what I want you to understand. When you see a poll that shows a candidate up by 20 points, ask yourself a simple question. Who paid for this poll? Who released this poll? And what do they want me to believe? Because polls are not neutral. They are not scientific in the way most people think. There are tools designed to shape public perception. And when you understand that, you stop being a consumer of information, you start being a critic of information. And you start looking at who benefits from the narrative. You start asking why certain stories get pushed and other stories get ignored. You start realizing that the media doesn't report the news, they create the news. They decide what matters and what doesn't. They decide who's ahead and who's behind. And they decide when to tell you the truth and when to tell you a fantasy. And the only defense you have against that is your own critical thinking. The only defense you have is being willing to question what you're being told and be willing to look at what actually happened instead of what someone told you. Right? Now, let me get into some of the specifics about this race because the details matter. The candidate who lost was running on a platform that the media loved. She was saying all the right things according to the establishment playbook. Francesca Hong was basically saying that she wanted to abolish prisons and then try to draw back on it and take back what she said and say, we should uphold public safety. But not once did she mention that she was wrong. She had endorsements. She had money. She had a machine behind her, and her opponent was running on issues that the media either ignored or mocked. Immigration, economy, public safety, common sense policies that regular people care about, that the coastal media elite think are beneath them. And what happened on election night was a referendum on that disconnect. The voters looked at the shiny candidate with all the media support and all the polls numbers, and they said, no, thank you. They chose the candidate who was talking about their lives. They chose the candidate who was talking about their struggles. They chose the candidate who wasn't afraid to say things that made the commentators uncomfortable. And that right there is the lesson that the media still hasn't learned. You can control the narrative for a while. You can stack the deck. You can manipulate the polls. You can run favorable coverage. But at the end of the day, the voters decide. And when you spend years telling voters that their concerns don't matter and their values are outdated and their way of life is wrong, eventually they're going to tune you out and vote against everything you stand for. And that's not a conspiracy theory. That's cause and effect. That's the natural consequence of a media class that has completely lost touch with the country they're supposed to be covering. And this is where I want to bring into the broader point about trust, because I think that's what this really comes down to. The American people don't trust the media anymore. And the media doesn't understand why. They think it's because of misinformation or foreign interference or social media algorithms. But the real reason is much simpler. The real reason is that the media keeps being wrong and keeps refusing to admit it. In every election cycle, they tell you one thing and reality tells you something else. Every major story that they get the facts wrong and then quietly correct it on page 12. Every time they paint a picture of America that don't match what you saw in your own neighborhood. And after a while, you stop believing them. And after a while, you stop trusting them. And after a while, you stop watching. And that's why their ratings are down. That's why their credibility is shot. That's why even when they try to do good journalism, nobody believes them because they cried wolf so many times. And the saddest part is they don't even see it. They think the problem is that they're not communicating effectively enough. They think if they just find the right messenger or the right format, people will come back. But the problem isn't the packaging. The problem is the product. The product is broken. The product is biased. The product is dishonest. And no amount of fancy graphics or soothing music or diversity hires is going to fix the fact that you are selling people a narrative that don't match their reality. So now let me bring this home with some practical wisdom, because I want you to walk away from this video with something you can use. And here's what I want you to do going forward. When you see a political story, ask yourself what the other side will say about it. When you see a poll, ask yourself if the sample actually represents the people who vote. When you see a pundit reacting to election results, ask yourself whether that person has ever been right before. Because the people who are the loudest in their predictions are usually the ones who are most invested in a particular outcome. And when you understand that, you can watch these meltdowns with a completely different perspective. And you can watch them and smile because you know something they don't know. You know that reality has a way of humbling people who think they have it all figured out. And you can take comfort in the fact that no matter how many polls they rig or narratives they spin or excuses they make, the truth always comes out eventually. It might take a while. It might take an election night or a court ruling or a leaked document, but the truth always finds a way. And when it does, the people who built their careers on lies are left standing there with nothing to say. And that's exactly what we saw on that live broadcast. People who had been telling you one thing for months were suddenly speechless because reality had walked in the room and they didn't know how to process it. And then the crazy part is, what I'm saying is they got a taste of their own medicine of rigging elections, because when he stood here basically saying, wow,
Okay. Wow.
suddenly overnight in that election night, all the mail-in ballots or absentee ballots suddenly went to Francesca Hong out of nowhere. Late night ballot drop suddenly put Democratic Socialist Francesca Hong in the winning position. Way to play dumb, NBC. Way to act like you don't know the game, but the game is amongst each other now. Eating each other alive, as I say. So here's what I want you to leave with, family. I want you to leave with a scripture that speaks directly to this situation. Proverbs chapter 21, verse 31 says, "The horse is prepared against the day of battle, but safety is of the Lord." Now, let me break that down in plain English, because I know not everybody grew up in church. What this means is you can make all the plans in the world. You can have the best strategy. You can have the best polling. You can have the best media machine money can buy. But at the end of the day, the outcome is not in your hands. You can prepare the horse for battle, but you cannot guarantee the victory. And that's a lesson that applies to every area of life, not just politics. You can have the best resume and still not get the job. You can have the perfect business plan and still fail. And you can have every poll showing you up by 20 points and still lose. Because there are forces at work that are bigger than your planning. There are things you cannot control, and the wise person understands that and stays humble. The wise person prepares but also prays. The wise person works hard but also trusts that the final result belongs to something greater than themselves. Sometimes rejection is a blessing. And you can see this was a blessing and a gift outwardly shown before our own eyes, that the American people's voice is still heard, which should be priority and always be upheld in the name of democracy, as the Democrats like to say, right? Because the simple fact is, the rejection of Francesca Hong and what the Democratic machine and what the propaganda and the narrative and the polls and things that the media wanted you to believe truly shows you, in that blessing of rejection, not only is our voices being preserved and exercising our right, and we stay in the good fight to make sure and uphold that in the name of election integrity, and the power is to the people, as it should be, because these are public officials and they should be serving public officials. They should be serving the people, rightfully so, in the name of journalism. And so should the politicians be prioritizing the people over party, not party over people. But the rejection of Francesca Hong was the blessing of preserving our country and the beauty of what it is within our holidays and coming together within our family members and celebratory action taking place, in which the pillars of our country and holidays has always been a part of the fabric of our country as the United States of America. And also upholding public safety and securing our country so we can have a country. So just because the media may not like that the politician may be rejected, the people have spoken, and the blessing of it was that we get to preserve the American fabric and what the soul is and what makes America great. And the people we saw it on that television screen had forgotten that lesson. They had convinced themselves that their planning and their polling and their narrative control would guarantee the outcome they wanted. And when it didn't, they were lost, as you can see, because they had to put their faith in their own machinery they had put in. That's where they put their faith, in their own machinery, instead of putting their faith into something real. And now for people who aren't spiritual, let me give you a life wisdom that applies the same way, life wisdom wise. Here's what I want you to understand. Never assume you know how something is going to turn out before it's over. The most confident predictions are usually the ones that age the worst. The people who are surest about the future are usually the ones who understand the present the least. And the best thing you can do in any situation, whether it's politics, business, or your personal life, is stay humble about what you don't know. Keep your eyes open, keep your ears open, keep questioning the narratives that the people are trying to sell you. And don't let anyone tell you that something is decided before the votes are counted, or the game is played, or the deal is closed, because life has a way of surprising people who get too comfortable. And the people who survive and thrive are the ones who never stop paying attention, being attentive and awake. And the people who never stop thinking for themselves, the people who refuse to be told what to believe. That's the kind of person you need to be, family. Not a follower of polls, not a follower of pundits, a follower of facts, a follower of truth, a follower of what actually happens, not what someone wants you to think happened. So I'm going to ask you something in the comments. What was the last time you saw the media get something completely wrong or refuse to admit it? I want you to drop it in the comments below because I know everybody in this family has at least one example. Let's compare notes. Let's build a record together of the times the narrative didn't match reality. Because the more we document these moments, the harder it becomes for them to gaslight us. And I want you to remember what we talked about today. Polls are not predictions. Media is not objective. And the only opinion that matters at the end of the day is the one expressed at the ballot box. Everything else is noise. Everything else is spin. Everything else is people trying to sell you a story that benefits them. But you don't have to buy it. You can see through it. You can call it out. And you can keep moving forward with your eyes wide open, knowing that the truth always wins in the end. It might take longer than you want. It might cost more than expected. But the truth always wins. Let the love supersede the hate. Spread that peace, love, and positivity. I'll catch you in the next one, family. Peace.